A very good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me in this beautiful city. I enjoyed a bike ride over here in the sun this morning. Really fantastic, beautiful city. My name is Emiel Brok and I'm here for you to talk about several things. I want you to remember 5 things from this talk. One is, how can you objectively measure your digital sovereignty? 2 is, how is the objective scaling of digital sovereignty defined? How can you improve your digital sovereignty level? If you've known your level, how can you improve it? What can you do to measure your own digital sovereignty level? And finally, I think we should dance and not fight in the situation where we're in right now. So let's get right to it. My name is Emiel Brok. I'm Global Sovereignty Ambassador at SUSE. Beautiful title. Basically means I travel around the world to talk about digital sovereignty, and I try to explain everyone that digital sovereignty starts and ends with open source. Without open source, it's super difficult to reach a proper level of digital sovereignty. That's an important message. And I work for SUSE, and SUSE is, as you might know, an open source company. We're very proud of that element, and therefore it fits very well to the digital sovereignty subject. But there is more. There is also an organization in Europe called Appel, and that's a European organization for open source companies. So in Appel what we do is this. We are in Brussels, we are at all the different member states, and we are lobbying for open source. And you can say nowadays the discussion, the lobby that we do is also more a wider discussion. It's also now about digital sovereignty. Besides my work for SUSE and for DOSPA and for Appel, I also have my own YouTube and, of course, in this audience, a PeerTube channel called The Friday Catch-Up, where I interview people from all over the open source industry. We talk about their love for music, because I have the feeling that everyone who loves open source also has some kind of love for music and for open source. And I try to make a connection in that video series. So the DOSPA. The DOSPA is the Dutch Open Source Business Alliance. And I founded that together with 3 other open source enthusiasts in the Netherlands. And it's clearly that it's an organization for companies that want to make business, that want to make profit out of the business of open source. And through the DOSPA we have a representation in Appel. And I'm very proud to say that we are here in Sweden, and in Sweden there is an organization which is also just like the DOSPA reporting into Appel, and therefore has a voice into the European policy that we are bringing out, and that's OS Sweden, Open Source Sweden. And I'm very proud, it's actually the first time on stage that we say something about that SUSE now also will join Open Source Sweden. I'm really happy with that, because that will give the open source industry in Sweden even more power. So you have some breaking news here that SUSE will join OS Sweden, and I see a few members of OS Sweden here in the room as well. Okay, so if you look at the company that I represent, SUSE, we have several contributions that we bring to the legacies and to the different situations. We have global institutions that we are participating in. So there's obviously the Linux Foundation, there's an Open Initiative Network. I will tell a bit more about digital public goods in a minute. In Europe we have Open Forum Europe, OFE, Linux Foundation Europe, but there's also initiatives like Eurostec. And then of course here in local there is organizations that are lobbying for open source local as well. And sometimes people ask me, how can we contribute in helping the lobby for digital sovereignty and open source in Europe? Well, just become a member. If you are an open source company, become a member of one of the organizations in your country. So if you're in Sweden and you run an open source business and you're not a member of OS Sweden yet, I highly recommend you to make sure that we are making clear to the European Parliament members that the open source industry is already here, it's already strong, and we do not need to make a lot more effort in keep on developing new stuff. What we need to do is make sure that what's already there is being bought by governments, so open code and open money, open code. A little bit about SUSE. I don't want to make it a SUSE selling story here, but we have 4 products, and I had these slides actually taken out, but when I was walking around here and talking to people, I figured out that some people don't really have an idea of SUSE, what we do nowadays. So I decided to bring up a few slides on SUSE. Many people know SUSE from back old days. I heard it a couple of times saying here as well that at university, also here at Chalmers, that the Linux that was taught here was SUSE Linux many years ago. And you see that all over Europe, all over the world, that I would say people that are working a longer time in the Linux environment, that they start working on SUSE. We're still here. We're quite a nice company nowadays. We have 4 business units that we work on. It's obviously still Linux, SUSE Linux Enterprise Server, SUSE Linux Enterprise Micro. There is Cloud Native. You might know Ranger. Ranger is actually a project from SUSE. It's an open source project, fully open source, everything, but it is managed and governed by SUSE. And of course, AI. AI is an important market for it nowadays as well. So where are we at the moment? We're about 1 billion revenue. We have around 2,500 people. So quite a substantial company if you compare it to many other open source companies in Europe. It's all nice, all those numbers about SUSE, but what makes me proud of SUSE and why I work at SUSE is, if you look at the, there are 2 things actually. One is, when we look at our portfolio and there are elements that are proprietary, but we think it's valuable to the open source industry, then it happened now 3-4 times that we just bought a proprietary company and we made it open source. So, for example, NeuVector, it's a security tool on Kubernetes in a cloud native space. We really thought that that element was missing in the open source portfolio, so we bought this company and made it open source. This is one of the things that really makes me proud of being a small, tiny part of SUSE. But enough now about SUSE. Now let's go into the talk of today, open by design. Well, as I said, it starts with open source. And there are many great open source companies in Europe and all over the world. And if you want to have digital sovereignty, it really starts with open source. And to make that clear, I need to go to the next slide. Okay. Let me do it like this. Oh, okay. One moment. And yes, here we go. Digital public goods. Digital public goods is an initiative from the United Nations, and they want to make sure that all sorts of products, not just software, also physical products, if they are really in a definition of open source. So the United Nations defined 8 elements, and if you comply with these 8 elements in their definition, you're then an open source company, you're a digital public good. And really proud that SUSE is a digital public good, is recognized as a digital public good. So that's one of the aspects that really makes me proud, and it's important for the open by design, sovereign by choice. So the sovereign by choice element. If you talk about sovereignty, we did a research and we came with this number last week, and we investigated globally, and we asked the audience, the people, if you look at your digital sovereignty, do you prioritize this aspect? Do you prioritize digital sovereignty? And what you saw, the outcome was staggering. There was only a very small percentage, less than 2%, that said we don't care at all. And all the other people that were asked, they said, yes, we are really taking care of digital sovereignty, or we are right at the planning. And you see that over half of them said, yes, we already are having a digital sovereignty strategy. So it's a big topic. And a couple of years ago when we were talking about this topic, it was more to you at FOSDEM, it was at developers conferences, and they really understood the importance of autonomy, of control, of freedom, of choice. Nowadays, because of the digital sovereignty discussion and what's happening in the world, it's became a lot easier to talk about it, and you see that already in 98% of the cases. The boardroom now understands the topic as well. So that's really a big shift compared to a year ago. So you can make a very complex definition. There are several definitions of digital sovereignty, but it really comes down to a couple of things. It's about control over data, it's about autonomy, and as I said, choice is vital there. So there are several definitions, and you can find different ones, but it really comes down to who is the boss over your IT infrastructure and the data which resides on it. If I make recommendations on what you should do with your IT company, I want to make a disclaimer, because I'm not a lawyer, and in front of this audience, even nicer, I'm not a technician either. I myself was confronted with open source in my study. In 1997, I came to a student's house, and there was a machine and it was not running Windows, and I had no idea what it was, but it appeared to be, a couple of years later, I figured out that it was SUSE Linux at that point, and that was the first time I worked with it, but I didn't really realize that it was that much different products. And then I did my education in marketing. I have a degree in marketing, and then at some point I started working at an open source company in the Netherlands, and that's now 22 years ago that I started lobbying and fighting for open source. Often, if you talk about digital sovereignty, being sovereign, they say, yes, I am sovereign or I'm not sovereign. Well, it's not black and white. There are a lot of aspects that play a role. Sometimes you see also this way, like you can never have total sovereignty, so I might as well give up. Well, of course, I fully disagree with the element that we should give up going for sovereignty, but it is something that you hear, that they say it's either sovereign or not. But there is a lot of aspects that play a role there. There is elements like location, and I have to quickly check. One moment, the technician started the wrong presentation. Let me see here quickly if I can change it to the correct one. Where did you go? One moment. Is it showing up there? Mr. the Technician, can you help me in setting up the right so I can continue my conversation? Is he still around here? No? Okay, well then I'll just continue with what I have. That's fine. Oh, there he is, yes. There is a talk called foss-north 2, if you can set it up. Because what I wanted to do, and why is there a second presentation? Because I had an explanation of how digital sovereignty, of which element it exists. And I gave examples of every element, because there are 8 elements in the EU Cloud Sovereignty Framework. That's a framework that is set up by the European Commission, and that gives you exactly on where you are in your digital sovereignty exercise, there is another presentation called foss-north 2. Yeah, it should be there. I think it's that one. I think so. But then looking at it and talking about it, I thought, let's look at these 8 different elements that define digital sovereignty as if you are going to build a house. Because if you're going to build a house, there is a lot more logic into it. Is this the right presentation? I can go through it. I don't know, because this is the same. It's different at around slide 10 or so. Yeah, let's go on. And here we go. Isn't it exciting? Should be seeing a chameleon starting to build a house, because that's what I thought is a better way of explaining all these elements. And no? Yes, this is it. Okay. So if you are going to build a house, you have to concern different elements. The first element that you see the chameleon is wondering about, oh, now I lost mine, but it's okay, I'll do it like this. Is if you're going to build a house, is look at the piece of land where you're going to build it. So you are looking at the piece of land, and then depending on where your land is, where you're going to build a house, you have to apply to the rules of that piece of land. So that's an important element, and in the sovereignty, in the cloud sovereignty framework, that is legal and jurisdictional sovereignty. Another element in building a house, obviously, is that who is the owner, who will be the owner of the house if it's built up, and that's important, because if you are yourself the owner of the house, then you have full jurisdiction over it. The decisions that regarding this house are yours. So you have your elements regarding the piece of land and the ownership, both very important in the sovereignty of your house. But then you go and you will continue to build your house. And if you look at the next step, if you're going to build your house, is you have your materials. And the materials that you build your house of, if you want to have a really good concrete foundation for your house, you must make sure that the materials are clear, and not just the bricks that you use, also your whole supply chain. So if you look at the element, it's the supply chain sovereignty. Another defined element, so-called objective in the EU Cloud Sovereignty Framework. Then there is the blueprint. How is the house built? How strong is it? How much can it hold? In other words, after it's built and you want to change something in the house, is it possible? Do you have still the papers, the blueprint of how the house is built? Who owns that? Is that you, or is that someone else? Is that someone else, a European citizen, or is that somebody outside of Europe? That's important in how digital sovereign you are. So that's an important element as well. Then we're going to look at the sustainability, the 8 elements in the Cloud Sovereignty Framework. Do you have your own power supply for the house? So will you build your house and put the solar panels on the roof? So if the power supply from the government, from the street stops, will you still be able to run your house? And if you then continue and you have you build your house, you want to make sure that what's inside is safe. So then we'll look at the phase 3 of building a house. After you looked at the land, you start to building it. Now you must make sure that it is secure. So you create a vault for your the stuff that's inside your house. And you also want to know the alarm system. Who has access to the alarm system? All these elements play a role in how sovereign is your house. And then we will look at the last element. And the last element, you finally have your house built. You're sitting in your chair, enjoying, and you have the security element there. So let's look at the living and the maintenance. So who owns the master key? And that is a analogy for the operational sovereignty. So if you build a house, there is a lot of similarity to how you will, how you can look at your IT infrastructure. And here's an important element in the legal and jurisdictional sovereignty. That's this one, and that's about the Cloud Act. I think many of you know that the Cloud Act exists, right? Who knows about the Cloud Act? Yeah, I see the majority. It's an act described by the US government, and many people know that it has got a lot of influence, and that there is to the American government the possibility to have a look at the data that is on machines from American companies. But did you also know that cloud, in Cloud Act, is an acronym? It stands for clarifying lawful overseas use of data. In other words, it's not just about the cloud, it's also what you have on premise. So if your data is on owned by American company machine, or if the data, the software on this machine is owned by an American company, that means that the Cloud Act says that it can go there and get your data. But it's even worse, because we don't know how far this already goes, because another element that the US government set up is the so-called gag order. A gag is a mouthpiece, so you cannot talk anymore. It's called the gag order. And what that says is that the American government, through the Cloud Act, has the right to ask for your data, but not only ask for your data, they also can forbid you to talk about it. So if you're an American citizen and you breach with that, the penalties for it are quite severe. So Cloud Act is not cloud from just the cloud, it's literally every device that's all over the world that's owned by American companies, and that means that the data on those machines are liable under the Cloud Act. So if you look at your sovereignty, this is an important aspect. And it's not something I'm saying, it's not something that SUSE is saying, it's part of the cloud sovereignty framework. So that's an important element to let you know. By the way, if someone has questions, comments, complaints during the talk, feel free to jump in at any time. That's nice if we have a dialogue going on. Another element that I want to point out, as I said earlier, when we're building the house, it's about the materials. In other words, your software BOM, your SBOM, your software building of materials, is an important element. In fact, it's the most important element. It counts for 20%. So the different elements that I mentioned in building a house, which contribute to the cloud sovereignty framework and eventually your digital sovereignty level, this is the most important element. There are different weighting factors, but this one is very important. And when you look at the software industry, I myself have a food and marketing degree, and coming from the food industry, you can say, how do they track whether or not a product, an end product, is safe or not, is allowed to be in a shop or not. And then you can look here at how the food industry already does it for a very long time. So they look at the ingredients, they look at how the ingredients are being processed, they put labels on the different semi-products, then they make sure that there is a tracking, and at the end there is also responsibility for a life cycle. And that's interesting, because if you would compare that to what nowadays the software industry looks like, you can see a very clear similarity there. So there is now a source, the source code. You build out of these different elements your product, you ship it, and there is service around it. So if you look at how they do it already for decades in the industry around food, they do that now also around in the software industry, and the same methods are being used now to define your supply chain guarantee. And then a little bit advertisement for SUSE again, because I'm really proud, as I already said a few times. And one of the elements is this, that if you look at common criteria level 4+, that's an objective way of measuring how secure your supply chain is. And I'm very proud to say that SUSE is the only operating system that has a supply chain authentication at that level. So that is something where if you would go along in your IT stack with SUSE products, this is, by the way, specifically for SUSE Linux Enterprise Server, then you know that you will have the highest level of supply chain security. So the framework. A little bit more about the framework. It's only 6 pages, so it's not a really big, difficult document. You can easily write through it. It's, the language is quite doable, and I have to give a compliment to the European Commission that they created this document, the EU Cloud Framework. You can just go to the website. If you Google EU Cloud Sovereignty Framework, you see it. And you'll see then the 8 aspects, the 8 objectives that I mentioned earlier. And you'll also see this, because for every aspect, every objective, they look at the level of sovereignty from level 0, which basically says you have no sovereignty, until sea level 4. That means you have full digital sovereignty. And if you are going to look at yourself, like, okay, my IT stack, how sovereign is that? Then for every element, you can see, okay, does it have no sovereignty? Is there only jurisdictional sovereignty? Is there data sovereignty? Is it digital resilience? Or are we at full digital sovereignty? Important element in this, by the way, is sometimes also when they say full sovereignty. At the moment, for an enterprise, it's almost impossible to have 100% digital sovereignty. Anyone knows why? Which element is blocking full sovereignty for any company, also for SUSE, also for any open source company, any, well, proprietary company obviously as well. Any ideas?
Natural resources?
Sorry? Do you mean hardware? Yeah, that's great. But the answer is hardware, basically. Because at this moment, there is no open source hardware at enterprise level. There are POCs and tests at this moment happening with open source hardware. But at this moment, there is just no open source hardware which is fully open source on silicon level. In other words, you can as an organization, you need to know how digital sovereign you want to be. And if you then look at the EU Cloud Framework, you have these four levels, well 5 levels of digital sovereignty, and open source hardware is for not any company at this moment on enterprise level achievable. Okay, so now we have a definition of 8 different sovereignty aspects, and they are being measured in 5 different levels. But what do we do now? How do you know yourself where you are? Well, what we did is we created a self-assessment. So anyone who wants can now go and measure their own digital sovereignty level. What we did is we created this self-assessment, and we looked at all 8 aspects, 8 objectives, and per aspect, per objective, we have created 4 questions. And it's a self-assessment, so if you want to cheat, it's up to you. But if you really want to have a clear knowledge of where you are, then there is this test that we've created. And if you go to the website and you hover over it, you will see per question what SEAL 3 resilient, for example, in this case, means. But if you hover over 4, you will see what full sovereignty in that aspect is. So if you go and if you're curious for your own level of digital sovereignty, you go, I have a QR code later, and you just do the test and you just answer 32 questions. So 4 questions per objective, and within around 15 to 20 minutes, you actually know where you are. And then, if you filled in those 32 questions, you will get an answer. I just quickly filled it in here. I made a screenshot, but it's just quite simple to answer these questions and then figure out for your stack where you are. And yes, it's something we at SUSE made, but it's for anyone to use, and it's also valid for any enterprise, and it's not specific SUSE. So it's 4 steps. First step is the 8 different objectives and the 4 questions per objective. Then you will get your SEAL level per element. You will get the answer, and then based on the score, you will get recommendations. And finally, and only at that point, you give away your data, your privacy. At this point, all the data, all the results from the self-assessment that you did stay on your own computer. We don't know where you are. So if you then answer those questions and you did that, and you want to have a discussion, a conversation with a SUSE expert on digital sovereignty, then you will fill in a form and we will contact you, or you can contact us. But I want to emphasize that it's a really privacy-friendly self-assessment. So disadvantage of that is that people ask me now, okay, how many people did this test and what's the average outcome? We don't know, because there is no data. We did not collect any data on it. It's just that we want to make easy for any enterprise to do this test and to figure out where you are. One recommendation, if you go to do this test, you can do it with only one product in mind, but if you do that, then obviously you will only get the result for this one product, and it doesn't really give you much information. So my recommendation is go for the middle, is have a stack in mind. For example, look at your, well, let's say you have AWS and you have your products on there, then fill it in for that product stack. And if you want to do it for your entire company, it will probably be too wide, and then the end results and the recommendations will probably not have that much value. So recommendation is to have one product stack in mind and then do the test. Here is the QR code. If you're interested, you can go and do the test yourself. If you have any questions, feel free to come to me, to reach out to me or anyone from SUSE. But we also want to make sure that it is available for anyone. So go and do the test. And I want to close with saying that it's all about open source, but it's not just about open source, it's also about choice. And making sure that using open source software, selling open source software, but it still should be about choice. And what you hear often nowadays with the current situation in the world is that they want to fight. My ask to the world, to the open source industry, be smart and don't see it as a fight. So we SUSE should not compete, should not fight with our competitors, with Red Hat, with Canonical. We should work together, and we should see it more as a dancing floor. And if you're on a dancing floor, you need to be able to keep your own balance. You need to be able to stand on your own. So my recommendation to anyone in the open source industry is dance and not fight. In the beginning I said, I asked you to remember 5 things. Now it's getting tricky because I don't have my notes anymore. But I said in the beginning that it would be great at the end of this talk if you know how to objectively measure your digital sovereignty, which aspects play a role. The second element is how the scaling works. That was the steel levels. Remember those 5 levels? The third element is that you can define your own level. The fourth element is how you can improve. Well, if you do the test and you will get the result, you will get recommendations how to improve. And the last element is dance not fight. And therefore, I'm really proud, as I said in the beginning, that SUSE is now also part of OS Sweden. So together with other open source companies, we can make sure that open source really has a good, strong voice in the governments, from local governments all the way up to United Nations for global power. So I want to thank you all very much for your time. And if you have any other questions, then feel free to ask them now.
Thanks so much. I kind of wanted to clarify a little bit about hardware. How would the Cloud Sovereignty Act doesn't talk a great deal about hardware, and it's my understanding that you can reach seal level 4 on non-European hardware.
Yeah, correct. Because there is basically no, as I said, there is basically no enterprise-ready open source hardware at the moment. So if you would make a demand for something which does not exist, that's kind of difficult. So there was discussion behind the doors about how granular we would make the different levels. We came to the 5 levels. There's already been working on, you could say, .2 or 2.0 of the framework. And in the framework that will come, as soon as there is hardware on open source hardware available and also widely available for enterprises, then you can assume that it will be an added level to the sovereignty. So then at that point you probably will need to have your data residing, your software residing on open source hardware to reach level 4. Very good question.
So that's still a little unclear because you could use silicon, for example, made in England, like the Raspberry Pi CPU is made in England by Sony.
Yeah.
So that would fulfill all levels, even including hardware.
Yeah, but as far
It
as I
doesn't
know,
seem like there's any requirement in saying that hardware has to have an open source license, and there's really only one hardware license that's open source that's CERN developed. So you're saying that the EU is planning to require, say, open source hardware license and manufacturing of silicon in Europe.
yeah, but it's yes, a very good point. But as you understand, in this case, it's Linux Foundation who is supporting this project. Scalar V is in this, and Risk V is on this topic of open source hardware. And you're right that the Raspberry Pis produced in England, you should be able to get some sort of level, but we do not define Raspberry Pis as enterprise level yet. Like there are no 19-inch racks for Raspberry Pis at this moment. So the overall meaning within Europe, within the European lobby, is that at this point we're not there yet. We need to make sure that your 19-inch rack can be open source, and then we could also make that as a demand to prove your sovereignty level. Did that answer your question?
I think so. That's very interesting. So it's the lobbying group that is proposing to the EU to establish these framework rules.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. There are several lobbying groups. Like there's Eclipse Foundation, there's Linux Foundation, there's Open Forum Europe. There is, well, I probably forget a very important one. Sorry for that.
I think the FSFE is also.
Of course, Free Software Foundation Europe. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's an important party as well. So yeah, it's a very good comment, and it was actually one of the elements for debate. What do we do with open source hardware?
I see.
Yeah, it was a debate within the different organizations. And what I want to say as well is what I like so much about the framework, that in a fairly short time, if you compare it to other frameworks or acts or all these rules and regulations they make, they become very thick packages of difficult to read documents. And the Cloud Sovereignty Framework, it's, as I said, only 6 pages, and if you understand basic English, you can go through it, and it takes you maybe an hour, and then you really know where you are. And
that's good.
I think that's a good element, because there was also a lot of discussion, maybe to give you a little bit of an insight of what was happening, that there were some groups that wanted to have a lot more details and a lot more granularity in how sovereign you can be, and which elements should play a role. But I'm happy that it was decided that we would go for a quick and something really, it was on the 18th of November last year, that the framework was published. And something which I really find great already that you see, at least in the Netherlands, I know that for sure, and I saw some other examples in Europe as well, that in tenders that are going out right now, they already say, if you have sea level 3 or higher, you have a privilege above a company that does not have that. So there you already see an added value for companies to make sure that they are at the right level. And a self-assessment, of course, doesn't give you that, but a self-assessment at least gives you an idea where you are. There was a question in the room as well.
Question, sorry, yeah.
That was a good question, thanks.
I'm a bit confused, like it's the first time I hear about this Cloud USA, and it seems like, for example, if you have a SUSE VM or like some sort of thing in Amazon Web Services, and they require you to comply with policy, how does that affect, first of all, how would that work? And the second question is this cloud policy that came from the EU as a response to the US Cloud Act, maybe?
So your first question is the Cloud Act. Whether or not if you put your data on AWS cloud service, if it's liable under the Cloud Act. The answer is yes. The answer is if it's on an AWS server, then your data is falling under the Cloud Act. But I have to, one important element about the Cloud Act is that we know that the current administration in America, maybe the Cloud Act reaches this far, and we understand that if they would like to have something which is this far, it will take probably 10 minutes or so from his time to make a directive that says I can go that far. So looking at the paper reach of the Cloud Act at this moment is interesting, because it then tells us where we are right now. And your example, data on AWS or on other hyperscalers, means that it is falling under that. There's no escape from that. But you can say that any company that has a liability in America, and you can also say that the company that I work for, SUSE, we have quite some revenue in America. So what happens if someone will come to us and say you need to give your data? I don't know. I honestly haven't seen this, but I understand. I can imagine that if they want to have it based on the Cloud Act, they can't, because we are a European company. But yeah, if they want to have it, they might take it illegally, or you never know. But being a European company, at least make sure that you are not valid and not liable under that act. Did it answer your question?
It doesn't actually offer much protection, just being a European company. The most egregious example is what happened to the International Criminal Court, which is based in The Hague, Netherlands. So it is a democratically state institution which the United States, under the Trump administration, sanctioned and therefore forced Microsoft to cut off their email through which they do all their business. This is a profound breach of the rule of law. So if you use software or hardware from an American company, you are under the Cloud Act.
Yeah, they call that a kill switch. And I have to say, it sounds terrible, but for marketing purposes of European companies, and also the lobby for European open source companies, it's the best ever. Like, I was talking about the same topic already for 20 years, and exit strategies and these kind of stories was always, yeah, of course, we'll see, we'll go to the next talk and we'll see. But now, as I said, 98% of the boardrooms understand the severity of it. So there has been a big shift, and I think this is one of the important elements. Another element, by the way, I didn't talk about it at all, which is bad, of course, for my CEO, but I didn't talk about AI. But AI is a very important element as well, because by using non-European AI, we make the companies that are not in the EU stronger and stronger. So if there are open source alternatives and also European alternatives, then please use them as much as you can. And I'm not going for Europe only or Europe first strategy or something. It's open source, and open source is global. I think that's important to emphasize as well.
One has to watch out for China, because China has a similar act to the United States. It has two, in fact, PIPL and the Digital Services Act.
Yeah, I talk mostly about the America now, because that's the most visible. But you're right, and there are also, the European, but also India has got similar law, and Australia. So you see that more over the world they are putting these kind of laws in fact. But also you see that the framework, it's EU cloud framework, but I've been in meetings with Canadians where they use the EU cloud framework, Canadian framework, because you can imagine that we feel the pressure here specifically from America, but you can imagine in Canada they feel the pressure for digital sovereignty even stronger. Were there more questions, comments? Yes, there in the back. Thank you very much for all these comments and questions. It's really nice.
Yeah, but I mean...
Hello?
Hi.
I mean, you touched a really good point there. Now we are going to a bipolar world. You mentioned that open source is global. Technically speaking, public money becomes public software, and that public software can be used by Russia or China tomorrow to equiparate the balance. And they need to be relatively small countries, can use the innovation produced by open source in Europe to dismantle Europe. What is the policy? What is the thinking behind that?
The policy, I would say, from the majority of the open source industry here is that open source is global. So yes, anyone can use it, and it's the same discussion around if internet should stay free and uncontrolled or not. And they always then use the examples of child abuse, that every citizen in the world should be monitored. Let me say, from personal point of view, I really think that open source should stay open source. The security concept that I learned many years ago, security through obscurity, I think most people here understand what that is. Security through obscurity. Having a security level because somebody doesn't know anything, doesn't know one thing, and therefore cannot go into your castle, into your data. Once they figure out then what that is, they have full access, and therefore security through obscurity is not safe. And if you would limit open source, I hear that sometimes saying as well, that they say we should go for European open source. There's no such thing as European open source, in my opinion. Open source is global and available for anyone, and anyone can benefit from its fantastic pros. Do you agree? Who disagree with that? Somebody disagrees here with that? I'm curious. Now everyone is in open source here, right? This is preaching for their own church, of course, but it is...
Or free software. One can say free software too.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Any other questions or comments? No. I think it's time for a cup of coffee. Thank you all very much for all the questions and